Question on that, then I guess item number 3 is circling back with some continued discussion on leave policy. And I think where we left it last time, when we kind of ran out of time, was look at the proposal and circle back and share some information back. Shows up again.
Yeah. All right. So in your packet, you have the first one is just the slide I'm going to show here that kind of summarizes our response. All right. So as we had talked about last time, there were many things that I think we were kind of finding in common between our two proposals that were brought forward. As Clint mentioned, we moved ahead and looking at your language, and off to the left-hand side there, the things, these are probably kind of overarching bigger things that we felt like we could support. And the first one was eliminating the discretionary and non-discretionary. That was probably the biggest difference between our languages that we had brought forward. You can see there off to the right, in connection with eliminating that discretionary, non-discretionary, there are some things that we would want to be sure that we took a look at and would like to propose some adjustments and changes to, though, knowing that we're completely eliminating that. Kind of move to that in a minute. I'll keep moving down that left-hand side. The other thing we are ready to support and accept is your recommendation in continuing to maintain the same number of days that are offered, but then adjusting when those additional days get added. So you can see down below, anyone in years 1 to 4 would be given 15 days of PTO. And then between years 5 and 9, that used to be between years 10 and 14, that you would have another day added to 16 days. And then also the adjustment to 10 plus consecutive years receiving 17 days. That used to be 15 plus years. So providing that additional day a little earlier in someone's tenure within the district. And then again, off to the side, some of the things we would want to have considerations for looking at changes. So when we talk about eliminating that discretionary and non-discretionary categories, we wanted to first make sure, I may have missed it in your language. I know sometimes when I get into the red line document, I may have missed it, but I did see where we were delineating and saying that somebody needs to use their current paid time off before they tap into their accrued paid time off. So I think we'd want to make sure we denoted that. Okay. And then the next section is in reference to the blackout days. And that again is really that direct correlation to not having the discretionary and non-discretionary, because those are the days that I think we get most concerned with. And so I know in your original language, your recommendation was that if somebody is wanting to use a day of paid time off on a blackout day, that it would cost them 2 days of PTO. We countered back with that it would cost 3 days. Our basis for that is, I think we mentioned this before, that we haven't changed any of those blackout days. And we continue to think that those are really critical times, the kickoff of the school year and the conclusion of the school year. Those dates that you naturally know would be ones that people would be highly interested in using paid time off and connecting with a holiday, and extending holidays, and then also parent-teacher conferences and professional development days. We then also, did I repeat that? I jumped to the second bullet, I'm sorry. So that was actually the second bullet up there. The first one was the exchange at the end of the school year of any remaining paid time off days. Your original language was that individuals would be able to exchange 5 days of current paid PTO for 75% of the daily sub rate. And we reduced that down to 3 days. Our basis for that is that little bit of not knowing what kind of potential added costs that could incur. And that kind of coincides with that overarching concern of a little bit of unknown of what a change like this might bring for added sub costs. So I'd already covered number 2. The third bullet there is in reference to when individuals need to take a day of paid time off during a blackout day, and it's for one of those identified exceptions. I had added some language here to kind of clarify. If you go back to Appendix B, I think it's page 74, that's where that form is that right now individuals use if they want to exchange 2 days of sick leave for a personal day. And the back side of that page, on page 75, lists kind of what those reasons are. So it felt like we needed to keep some reference to that because I couldn't find in the language that had been brought forward where that was kind of defined, if you will. And then there was just one little correction in there, and it's in our current language, so this wasn't something that was specific to your proposal. It references that there's 2 kind of blackout provisions. I think there's actually 3. We talk about the beginning of the year. We talk about the days tagged to holidays, and then the third one is professional development and parent-teacher conferences. So I just thought we'd correct that while we're in there. And that we would use that same form for individuals that would want to request an exception from having to sacrifice 3 days on a blackout day. And then we would like to add that in that course of that request, HR could ask for documentation to support that exception. Then in the next bracket down below, the language brought forward was allowing for individuals to take 4 to 5 consecutive days off. And we can support that, but we felt like we needed to have something in there to provide a safety net that could be denied in some type of extreme situation. I think of, I don't know, this was an example I was immediately thinking of because we've had these Super Bowl, parades and things here that have happened recently that make you think of sporting events. And I'm thinking we're hosting the World Cup. And if the entire, 3rd and 4th grade in a building are all putting in to take the same week off, that's not going to be a great thing for a building. And so we felt like we needed to have something in there to provide some provision for being able to deny that extended use of paid time off for consecutive days. And then as we had in our original language, wanting to have that sunset clause so that we can have a chance to review this next year to see what that financial impact in our schools has been. And then the last one was in reference to language that was brought forward to increase the number of days that a 2-employee family could use for birth or adoption leave. And we would like to keep it as it is right now, which is 80 days. We recognize that that would be a very nice thing to be able to offer to our 2-employee families, but we also recognize that we provide family medical to our 2-employee families. So we feel like there's already some nice kind of incentives, if you will, and to move to 120 days is 6 months of leave. I mean, it's a pretty extensive amount of leave when you're talking about 2 employees within the district. So you want me to go through the red line language?
I don't know if that's necessary.
Okay.
These are like commonalities and adjustments. that
Yeah,
you're
and I
seeing.
tried in the red line because, you know, once you start adjusting a red line that's already there, I tried to highlight anything that I went and changed so that that might help us to, yeah. And I did not clean up any of our numbering or lettering. So, you know, we'll have to put all our brains together.
That, right.
Yeah. But yeah, I think I captured everything.
So I have, sorry,
Go for it.
questions. I noticed the sunset clause. I know last week we had discussed what kind of, if we sunset and determine that this is not the procedure best for Olathe, how will we revert back to what is in our negotiated agreement currently? Have we given that any thought of kind of how we go
Well,
backwards?
I think that when we put a sunset clause in, and this is, I won't speak for everybody, I'll speak for me. I'm thinking that at that point in time, you know, let's say that we look at, you know, hey, this has been just kind of we've had, you know, double the use of our subs. We have, you know, twice as many classrooms that don't have coverage, that kind of thing. You know, do we need to look at reverting back, or do we need to just make some adjustments in our paid time off language? So that's what I was kind of envisioning. I haven't asked my team if that's what you guys
Yeah,
are.
I said mine was more the financial interest of, okay, it's way too expensive and we agree. It's taking money away from potential salary schedule enhancements. Maybe the days change or the trade-in changes. It's the unknown.
Just a renegotiation.
And I'm not saying people will do this, but you know, there are people that use 0 days that now will feel, well, this is just fine because it's PTO, I can convert. We don't know what that conversion is going to be. That won't be a trade-off of sub savings for payout. That's the big unknown kind of financially.
So if I'm understanding them, to just try and summarize what you said, is in the event that the sunset would happen, we were to go back to old language, it would be this group who would then renegotiate exactly how that retransition would happen as well. I find myself wondering if 1 year is enough time to know how people change their behaviors and things too.
Right.
So
Well, and I
But
think
I
we would
understand.
have to, like, you know, we all know from working with kids, like when you implement something new in terms of a behavior strategy, the behavior increases, and not that this is a bad behavior, you know, but good behavior too. And so I think we'd have to, you know, carefully look at what those increases or changes look like a year from now, or we may be, you know, looking at, hey, we really didn't have a change, and so there's not maybe a need to make an adjustment. But yeah, I think Eric, you're right. It probably will take a few years for us to really know.
At least that would give us the flexibility after a year to say if something really escalated cost wise, to be able to take a look at that versus have that locked in for multiple years.
And the other question I have that might be a question for the law side of things. If we have a sunset clause that says this expires in 2025, and then heaven forbid we have a longer negotiation that time, and we're still, you know, we're going in September, October, November. What happens if we're on a continuing contract that says this thing sunsetted in 2025? But we're still functioning on that contract because we haven't finished negotiations for the next year? How's that? I don't expect you to know the answer off the top of your head. Just a question that
Why
we
is
should
everybody
consider.
looking at me? It's a good question here. Yeah, I would think you revert back to the original language, but it's complicated, and then as Michelle's getting, then we're into this world of and have a new system and the terminology. Yeah, I could look into that, maybe, because I'm not for sure.
Or if there's some way, I don't know.
Yeah, I
Now,
mean,
if there's a way to phrase it in such a way that
Yeah.
protects us from that happening.
Well, and I think that brings about a question I would have too, in terms of, you know, this is going to take significant reprogramming of what we currently
Sure.
set up, right? So if we were in that scenario, I don't know that we could even get Oracle reprogrammed to go back, you know what I mean? So there'd be a lot of trickle down, we'd have to,
So maybe the phrasing would be that the next, somehow tied to the next approved agreement.
oh.
Or I don't, or
right, maybe
something,
yeah.
some way to make it so where like,
Yeah.
instead of having it just automatically end at the end of the 2025 year.
Yeah, you could say it sunsets with the next approved agreement, some language like that.
Yeah, that might be
Kind of a
safer.
saving, kind of a savings
Yeah.
clause.
And am I understanding that like the sunset is not to necessarily go back to what currently is? So then is that really a sunset? Right, like if there's no intention of going back to what's currently printed, that's not a
Would it just be a
sunset.
renegotiation?
It's just a re,
Like a notice item?
yeah, it would just be a new notice item, wouldn't it?
An automatic.
That automatic negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
We can look at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the intent, I mean, I think we're on the same page on the intent, we have something where it escalate financially, sub costs or anything like that, that we want to look at that because that takes
Yeah.
money away from what we put in the salary schedule too, so I think we all want to look at that, just how do we word that, make sure that it's.
Well, and there's so much language in there, you know, the leave policy is one of those things that sometimes you have to live through things to figure out, oh, you know, that wasn't very clear. We've got a lot of these kind of situations that we don't even, we have a void and we don't ever address it. Those are the things that in our HR world, we come across. So just to be able to have conversation to say, how can we better clarify this?
Another option might be to have it as another permissive, like, if we know that something might need to adjust, a permissive item that we both agree to that doesn't count towards.
The items in the notice.
Right, if we know there might be some adjustments that need to be made.
I had a lingering question about the discipline policy. And I should have looked back at the discipline policy or how our current language is. We talked last time about, we didn't have like a deadline for when someone needed to put in or leave, if they're using leave in a pattern where it could be considered, gosh, you've missed every professional development day for the last 2 years. Can you talk through the language that you propose so that I think when we caucus, we can go back and kind of think through that?
Oh, yeah. I think in going back to what we had initially proposed was, you know, we had a stipulation of wanting 2-day notice. And I think I spoke then of the difference that makes in us being able to fill a classroom position. If we have that notice, it's the night before and morning of that become really difficult to fill. And I had included in there that if we found a consistent pattern of that we could then, you know, follow up with disciplinary action of some kind in order to ensure that didn't become a chronic for someone. Is that what you're referring to, Leanne?
Yeah, I think if I'm reading right, this new red line is starting from the language that we had proposed last time. Is that right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so that language about the discipline policy is not in
No.
this.
Our next item is further discussion of the workers' compensation or solidly that we have both proposed funding two different ways.
Do we want to do what we did last time, which is caucus now about,
So our brains don't.
yeah,
become too
about
full.
PTO?
Thanks.
Is there a preference either way?
Yeah, we just want to be cognizant of time.
Mhm.
right, to get back and-
I mean, we don't have to do it the same. I mean.
Yeah, no, I think so. It would just- Obviously, just have to be cognizant of time.
Yeah.
Just need to try to get all the way through to the last item anyway.
Sure.
I think we do caucus, we just said
So
this amount of time.
Let's say
10 minutes.
10, 15 minutes, yeah.
Okay.
I think 10.
10's good. 10 minutes. Okay.
Okay.